this week's episode of Stardust Crusaders, everybody's favorite little butthole, the Boston Terrier Iggy, gets to have a battle with another animal stand user, a fierce falcon by the name of Pet Shop. Yes, that's actually its name. So this week's episode completely surprised me, and honestly, it might be my favorite episode of the Egypt arc thus far. My other favorite episode is probably the one where Polnareff fights against Anubis for the very first time, but something about this episode just screamed creativity, just how over-the-top and ridiculous it really was. This episode really was JoJo to the max, and oddly enough, it didn't feature any of the main cast, really, aside from Iggy in this week's episode. And what is really cool about this one is that Iggy actually talks. Kind of. You know, in a way, they actually did finally give Iggy a voice in the show. The thing is, it's basically just his inner monologue, but this is the very first time that we've actually really got to hear his thoughts, and he's a really intelligent dog himself. He just really doesn't want to help out JoJo and his friends, and he has no interest in Dio whatsoever. That is until he accidentally gets sucked into this battle with Dio's ultimate bird, Pet Shop. The episode actually opens up with this amazing con artist character, who I swear to God is one of the best bullshit artists I've ever seen, because he comes across as just sort of this normal beggar who's really upset that Polnareff is sort of treading on his turf, and then he reveals that he himself is actually like this hotshot who's basically just sort of been playing everybody in his territory, taking all of their money, and basically just looking like a beggar. But this guy is kind of like an information broker as well. He sort of knows where everything is, and he's actually hired by Jotaro and his friends to go and try and find the mansion where Dio is. And he does find it, and so does Iggy. This is finally when we're going to get to see Pet Shop in action. So, first they gotta build him up just a little bit. There's this nice scene where Iggy runs into these two massive, super pissed off dogs. One of them looks like a pit bull, one of them looks like a bull mastiff, but he just gives them one deadly stare, and they decide to walk off. However, they're attracted by this weird bird they see on the other side of this gate. So they start barking at it, and then they try crawling under the gate. And then suddenly, both of the dogs are decapitated, and then their heads are literally put on a massive spike made of ice. Barely any freaking censorship whatsoever, and it's just plain messed up. Not only that, but the con artist beggar actually found Dio's mansion, and right before he can make a quick escape, this freaking falcon summons a massive chunk of ice and literally slams it right into him, basically liquefying his body on impact. It's really violent and over the top. So Iggy decides, screw this noise, I want nothing to do with this guy, and so he decides to leave. The problem is, his conscience ends up getting the best of him, because there's this one kid who's looking for his dogs, who were just killed. He ends up finding both of them in the courtyard where the bird is literally eating their eyeballs, and that's when Iggy decides to make this nice heroic entrance where he jumps in, and I honestly thought he was talking at this point, because his actual lips are moving, but people can't actually hear him. He's actually just barking. It's really still just his inner monologue going on, and that's when the battle between Pet Shop and Iggy begins. And it's not so much a battle as it is Iggy just trying to constantly run away, but honestly, Pet Shop's powers are ridiculous. He's able to manipulate ice with the help of his stand by the name of Horus. This stand actually takes the form of this big mechanical mecha bird with multiple arms, and that's what it uses to summon the ice, throw them all over the place, and can even use the ice to actually heal his wounds as well, which, honestly, that's pretty awesome. Iggy and Pet Shop end up battling in the streets, and then somehow they make it down into the sewers. And this is actually where things do not look good for Iggy whatsoever, because he completely ices over everything and traps him down there. And at the very end of the episode, he has his paw trapped in ice and even fires all of his ice missiles at him, sort of giving us our classic to-be-continued screen. If you look at the preview of the next episode, though, you can see that it looks like Iggy is going to be just fine, but this still looks like it's going to be one hell of a rough battle. So what's the rundown? On this week's episode of Stardust Crusaders, this was a surprisingly fun episode, and at first, I thought there was going to be, like, barely any dialogue whatsoever. Just the fact that it was going to involve Iggy fighting against this bird, I thought it was mostly going to be a showcase of animation, but I was really glad that they actually finally gave Iggy a voice. It makes him seem like a little bit more of a character now. But this week's episode just took the weirdness of JoJo and had a lot of fun with it. I mean, I never imagined there would be a battle like this in the series whatsoever. I mean, just the fact that Iggy even exists in the series is kind of a big deal. The fact that there's another animal out there that can actually use stands is just as crazy. and it was really a powerful stand as well. Like, that thing was beyond devastating, especially when it destroyed that car and the con artist. That was beyond violent and over the top, especially when he killed the dogs too. That was just so freaking disturbing. This is a show that just really goes crazy with its violence, and there is very little censorship whatsoever. Just a little bit of black smearing here or there, but you pretty much see and hear everything. It's absolutely disturbing and nightmarish. But the action in this week's episode was also really good. This combined with the animation made the actual chase scene between Iggy and Pet Shop really exciting. I especially love when they do those classic filters where they put a different color over the actual scene just to emphasize how crazy things really are. Especially when they were running through the alley, when they went down into the sewers where Iggy's running against the wall. All of that looked really cool. The actual design of Pet Shop is just very interesting. It's just basically a realistic looking falcon, and it's wearing this like headdress, but it still has some human characteristics. I especially love that scene when they're down in the sewer and Iggy actually ends up scratching him, and he starts to get himself all pumped up by getting the blood on his feather and then licking it and spitting it out just like Bruce Lee. And even Iggy mentions, "Who do you think you are, Bruce Lee?" It just amazes me to think that somehow, some way, this bird had an opportunity to sit down and watch freaking Enter the Dragon. So this week's episode was pretty freaking awesome. It had some great action, some amazing humor, amazing animation and artwork, some grotesque and gory scenes, lots of tense moments, and I loved the cliffhanger that it actually ended on. This is definitely one of my favorite episodes of the Egypt arc, nay, of the entire JoJo series. It really made me appreciate Iggy all the more, even though he still basically is a little butthole. So I'm gonna give this week's episode a 5 out of 5. It's basically playing to all the strengths of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in this week's episode, and it was great to have an episode that centered on Iggy, finally getting to hear his voice for the very first time, and there was just a ton of ridiculous action. You guys should check it out. It was badass. Thank you guys for watching my review. Before you guys leave, make sure to tell me what you thought about this week's episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Did you guys have a favorite scene from this week's episode? What did you think of the battle between Iggy and Pet Shop? And what do you want to see from the rest of Stardust Crusaders? Make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow us on social media. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.